Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on weird and true mysterious stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Would you like even more content? Here's my Patreon. Now onto the stories. Case file number 1055, written by BreadLucky, the scary glitch tale of the time warp gas station. I experienced this glitch a few months back. This is a relatively short story, but still creeps me out to this day because of how certain I am of it. On to the story. So I was working in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in a travel job where I would stay in hotels throughout the week and then travel home for the weekend. I got off at 5 per usual, and before I got on the Pennsylvania Turnpike, I stopped at a mom and pop style gas station to fuel up for the trip home. Got my gas, went in, paid for it, and headed for the Turnpike. I drove for maybe 2.5 hours before I decided I was going to pull off and get a quick bite and use the bathroom. I punched in my GPS the nearest gas station and headed to it. And I swear to God, I pulled into the exact same mom and pop gas station. I walked in to get a burger and almost fell over. I was so freaked out. Finished up in the station, walked out to the truck, and my GPS reflected I was in the same spot as 2.5 hours ago. Those 2.5 hours of driving completely erased as it was after 7. I should have been halfway home. The only logic I have is that I fell asleep at the station, but surely someone would have woken me up if I was there that long. I remember the drive and the gas in my truck reflected I had been driving. It's my only glitch and it still baffles me. Case notes are file 1055, the scary glitch tale of the time warp gas station. So falling asleep at the gas station and then dreaming you drove for 2.5 hours, this is a possibility. We do know that people can have very lucid dreams, and sometimes it can be hard to distinguish what is real and what is a dream. I mean, that's a common trope in many science fiction, or even philosophy. It's kind of a horror setting for me. Back to TNG, where Riker is imprisoned in this alien camp, and he doesn't understand if it's because he keeps zipping between the camp or the prison colony and then back on the ship, and every time everything seems like it makes sense, but he doesn't know what's real and what's fake. So messing with your mind, even if it's your own mind doing it, is unsettling, for sure. Or you have the inner light. Man, TNG is just making all the references this week. It's kind of ironic, though, that I'm creeped out by the idea that reality isn't real, but I love the idea of simulation theory. So, I don't know what's going on in my mind there to square that circle, but something is happening. I don't know, maybe it's because it's just so high level that everything is a simulation, and then we wake up and it's the real world. But we chose, maybe it's because we chose to be in the simulation. I think that's what's going on. It's like load your own adventure, choose your own adventure. For the story though, in this particular case, if it was a glitch, it fits the parameters of a space-time anomaly or portal. So in those cases, you're just driving along and you zip ahead or zip back, and I could see that happening. It can affect time itself too, so it's almost like a reset. Although in this case, it's not a time anomaly because you mentioned the gas. You did actually drive, you just were zipped back. Which is freaky indeed. I wonder what your GPS history data would show. That's an interesting thing to check. See if it shows that you just teleported back. That would be weird. Case file number 1056, written by Senior Weather 3997. Is this a sign from the universe in a crystal miracle? 2 weeks ago, just after lunchtime, I went into my bedroom ensuite to go to the bathroom. When I came out of the bathroom, on the bedroom floor was an object that I did not recognize. In fact, it was so unfamiliar to me that I kind of nudged it with my foot to see if it was hard or soft or what. After tapping it with my foot, I realized that it was a crystal, quartz amethyst, I think. Now, it's only my wife and our 20-something daughter who live in our house, and no one has crystals or is into crystals. So I picked it up and rinsed it off with cool water, but didn't tell anyone about it for a couple of hours. When no one mentioned it, I said something to my wife and she knew nothing of it, as expected. Later on, my daughter walked into our bedroom to ask my wife a question and saw the crystal and assumed that my wife was meditating or something, since she'd never seen the crystal before. I was feeling increasingly creeped out, but the next day I began to consider it might be possible that this crystal had been provided to me. I've been going through a lot and working on my depression. Could this be? Has anyone heard of this kind of thing happening? Where an object just appears in your home. I want to feel good about this. but it still makes me feel uneasy if I think about it too long. Case notes are file 1056. Is this a sign from the universe in a crystal miracle? So this reminds me of that strange red ball, the story where there was just a random red ball in a mostly empty basement that was smooth, no other entrances, no reason for a red ball to appear in the basement area, but it just was there. There's no rational explanation that they could come up with. Kinda just like this, there's no reason for this quartz crystal to be in your home, but it was. I think it's far more of a fascinating glitch than just duplication or disappearance, because it's not supposed to be there at all. It's like the universe is not just mistakenly rendering or de-rendering an object, but losing track of who it even belongs to. So in a different universe, someone who does have the crystal probably lost it, or maybe even from this universe, because it is just not yours. So it could just have vanished and come to you for some reason. The universe all wonky. Definitely wonky. Bonus file written by Jimmypeglegs, discovering the eerie secrets of a medieval Tudor hall. Hello. I'm lucky enough to work in a Tudor hall in the UK. The building is late 14th century, although much of it is late 16th century and later. It's timber framed, and the electrics are in dire need of redoing, so it is a creaky and poorly lit old pile. Places like this tend to accumulate spooky stories, and the hall is no exception, with two old legends in particular. There have been loads of sightings around the place that have been reported by both staff and visitors. In the 7 years I've been there, I've been collecting these stories, and we've made a ghost tour from them. I'm somewhat of a skeptic, but I've had 3 experiences that I can't really explain. The first came in the summer of 2018. It was still bright out, so the hall wasn't too dark. I was closing the first floor of the house up on my own. I reached the room where a lot of the sightings were centered. Off to the side is a bedroom with a large oak door. I had my back to the main room whilst trying to close the door, as the bolt was jammed. As I was doing this, a massive crash happened right behind me. I spun around in alarm, expecting to see the suit of armor on the floor, but the room was deathly still. I could still feel the vibrations through the doorknob. Needless to say, I was freaked out and left. The second experience was quite fleeting, but I'm sure of what I saw. Again, at the end of the day, about 6 months after the first experience, in the service wing, there's a large Victorian kitchen, and just outside its door is a small staircase leading up to the servants' quarters and a guest wing. I was heading into the kitchen to turn the lights off, but I looked up at the stairs as I passed, and I saw someone in a long white dress pass across the top. It took me a moment as we had other staff in, but I realized that the last visitors had just left. Thinking we'd missed someone, I went up the stairs and searched for this visitor. I looked through several rooms, but there was no one there. Needless to say, it's a spooky old place and many of the staff don't like being there on their own. This is the third story. I was closing the house up in December last year. The house had been decorated for Christmas, and I was showing a new starter which doors to lock and where the lights are. I went into one of the rooms on the ground floor and turned the lights out before noticing that one of the decoration lights were still on. I walked up to the table and switched them off. My new colleague was standing in the doorway behind me. This is 5 p.m. in December, so it's dark. About 2 seconds after turning the fairy lights on the decoration off, something sizable drops to the floor in the fireplace. Another second later, something lands behind me as if it was thrown by someone. We were both startled, so my colleague switched the lights on and we looked for whatever had made the noise, but everything was in its place. It was very disconcerting, and no one could explain it. Case notes for the bonus file, discovering the eerie secrets of a medieval Tudor hall. You know, the more I read and think about spirit stories, the more my impression is that the vast bulk of these lingering fragments of sentience are just lonely. They're trying desperately to communicate or interact with us, but it's very difficult to do. They're sort of stuck in a limbo. The perpetual spectator of the game, unable to interact in any meaningful way with the living. The only hope for them is eventually their energy depletes and they fade away. It's only a small fragment anyways. The bulk of consciousness is transposed to a different universe via quantum immortality if they're dead. How much of it is still conscious, what is left behind? Is it just an imprint, almost like just executable code that doesn't have any sentience? Just operating along the lines of whoever was passed away, but not really self-aware. I hope it's the latter, because if not, it's kinda sad, isn't it? And now time for the quote of the day. If you look long enough and hard enough, you can find something to hate about anyone. However, the opposite is also true. Sort of like steel manning versus straw manning an opinion, but for an entire person. So you can try to view your, not opponents, the person you disagree with, his opinions, in either the best light possible, the steel man, or the worst light possible, the straw man, or just concoct an entirely different opinion or construct of what they actually believe. It's easier to attack something absurd that you make up about them, or about their worldview, rather than what they actually think. It's hard to square that, for sure. None of this is easy. These quotes of the day, I think, are meant to instill, thought processes in people, but don't mean that I'm perfect or anyone else is perfect. They're just thought experiments. And maybe they help you to improve yourself just a little bit here and there. A good way to start with that, indeed, is just to try to think the best of people, unless absolute evidence is provided that they aren't good people. Yeah, fair enough, I'd say.